My name's Jim Rogers. In my work life, I'm at the University of St. Thomas. I'm the director of the Center for Irish Studies, which is an academic group at St. Thomas. And other parts of my life, I'm also I guess you'd call me an authority, although I'm worried when people say that, about the Irish in Minnesota. If I have a expertise, it's on the Irish in Minnesota. Last year, I got involved with this project, the Friends of Highland Cemetery, which is a sort of an ad hoc group that was called into being by a number of concerned descendants of people buried here, as well as people who just have a general sense of history and a sense of what's at stake in this beautiful place. Highland Cemetery has been here since, I believe, the late 1850s. Again, I want to apologize. There's a terrific book of an amateur historian named Jerry Matson, who lived nearby and who took this cemetery on as a kind of a personal project, wrote a wonderful book called Church on the 7 Mile Prairie. This was originally affiliated with the Catholic Church not that far up the road, whose name escapes me right now, but for the last many decades, it's been the group that has, the church that's had charge of it is St. Joseph's in Rosemont. There's been a cemetery on this site since the late 1850s, and no one has been buried here since 1947. A woman named Kate Fahey, who ran a boarding house down in Lakeville, native of County Mayo, Ireland, was the last person interred here. Most of the people buried here were born in Ireland, and not just in Ireland, but in the western counties of Ireland, in County Mayo, County Galway, County Clare. And you walk through these lanes of stones, you begin to see that pattern, that what you're looking at are people who were, in most cases, immigrated in the late 19th century, post-famine. Many of them lived through the famine in Ireland. The cemetery was actually listed as abandoned for many years. The cemetery was overgrown. There were trees growing in it. There was no evidence that anybody cared about the cemetery. In the 70s, a number of people, notably Jerry Matson, looked after the cemetery, did some things, I don't know if you'll be able to shoot this or not, but restored some of the headstones by embedding them in the ground. Headstones had toppled over. They were a danger to people walking by. Cemeteries are always vulnerable. Kids love to run through cemeteries and play with things, and there was some danger there. At some point, and this is where the record gets a little fuzzy for me, and I don't fully know what happened, but at some point in 1999, St. Joseph's Church took on the project of cleaning up Highland Cemetery, and that's, I believe, the language they used. They cleaned it up. I guess the most important thing that the Friends of Highland Cemetery do is we bear witness, and that's not an unimportant thing to do. I mean, we live in an age of forgetfulness, and if we do nothing else, we bear witness to the importance of these graves. Let's take a look over here. This is a stone, the Sheridan family, and it's maybe one of those things that's notable for a mistake. And remember it, again, I wish Kevin were here. He could tell us all about the Sheridans and where their farm was and when they died and everything. This is John Sheridan, who I believe was a native of Ireland. I can't quite read it. But you want to notice an anomaly here. You notice S-H-E-R-I-D-A-N, but the N is written backwards, like it's in Russian script or something like that. These headstones, in the 19th century, people ordered their headstones from Sears, Roebuck and Company, or from other mail order firms. And you know, when you got something like this, sometimes they arrived spelled wrong. And this was not a small thing in the 19th century. People paid burial insurance regularly before they let their house go, before they let their gravestone go. People cared a great deal about their monuments. And then I just think it's kind of a, you know, here we have this unfortunate error that we have a dyslexic stonecutter, and a century later we still have Mr. Sheridan's name written backwards. This is an interesting stone here, just sort of a note about the graveyard. This wouldn't be allowed in a Catholic cemetery today, a pagan stone like this. Whenever you go to an old graveyard and you see a broken off tree, it's symbolic of a life cut short. This person, whose name was Orens, he would be one of the non-Irish people buried here, that it's symbolic of he would have died in an accident, died abruptly of a heart attack, sudden death. It's always symbolic of that. This sort of pagan symbolism is no longer allowed in Catholic cemeteries. This is the Casey family plot, and these are these metal rails that are around there are called palings. There were quite a number of palings in this graveyard. This is something that a practice that fell away some time ago, that people stopped putting these up. You know, what's happened with graveyards, not just this one, but every graveyard these days, is that we're slaves to convenience. And you can't, these things, as you might guess, make it extremely difficult to mow. So you can't mow, you can mow up to the edge, but then you're going to have to clip somewhere. During the 1999 remodeling, a number of these palings, for no reason whatsoever, were torn out and thrown back in the woods. So you can go back and find those rails right now, somewhere in the woods. Again, an insensitive thing. For some reason, this one was put back in, I'm not sure who did so. But this is another plot. You can see you're getting back quite a ways in history. Here's Ellen Casey, born 1802, died 1889. So we're talking about a woman who was 87 years old, born in Ireland in 1802, almost certainly would have spoken the Irish language. I have no idea when she immigrated here, but she's someone who you know, saw this country when it was new. This gravestone here is that of William B. O'Donohue. O'Donohue was a Fenian, and if you went back 130 years ago when this graveyard was active, the Fenians were a very important group in American Irish history. They were they're a group of most of them American Civil War veterans who had aspired to gain military skills in the Civil War in order to go back to Ireland and through military expertise throw the British out. The fact is, over in America, they were probably a lot better at marching and drilling and putting on uniforms than they were at actually doing anything, but they did accomplish some interesting things. In the years right after the Civil War, they made a number of incursions into Canada, which was still then a British territory, mostly in the east. One of the interesting ones, though, is this fellow here, William B. O'Donohue, who in 1871, slightly after the height of the Fenian movement, was working in Minnesota, in northern Minnesota. He was a school teacher by profession. Things were easy in those days. He first went to Washington, D.C. and got an appointment with President Grant, which a private citizen could do in those days, could go and see the president, and proposed that the president might, that it would be a good time for the United States to simply annex Canada. And my understanding is he got thrown out of the president's office for this plan, that maybe O'Donohue wasn't exactly a sensitive diplomat. So he came back to Minnesota and he organized an army of 35 men to invade Canada up in the northwest corner up by Pembina. And they set out to march on Winnipeg and got over the border a few miles, seized an unoccupied fur trading post in Canada, and then shortly thereafter were routed by the Canadian Mounties. One of the things I really love about this cemetery are these old fence posts, which I'm sure date from, if they're not original, they're very close to original. And I think that says something about the cemetery. You know, if it's just information, if it's just names about that you're talking about, well, you can record that, you can put that on the internet. If it's just genealogical dates, birth dates and death dates recorded on the headstones, nobody really cares. What really matters is that it has a wonderful sense of place, and that sense of place and that sense of sacred space, which people feel. I've brought a lot of people here to this cemetery, and people feel it. There is something that makes you solemn and reverential in this place, and I think it is a sense of sacred space that this place has, sanctified maybe by the headstones and the nearness of the past here. But if it's just information, nobody cares. It's the place itself that we have to protect. I really hope that these old fence posts, which are hand turned on a lathe, and you can see how decayed they are, and long fissures run down the sides of them, and then these iron pipes run through them. They're also something that's been here for a long time. Yeah, I don't know what the future of this cemetery is going to be. I suspect that whatever the future of this cemetery is, it's going to be a sort of a unusual anomaly. It's certainly out of step with the rising suburban construction around it. I hope that it's cherished long into the future, and that it'll stand here as a kind of a reminder that we didn't just pop up out of nowhere, that there is a history and a past and an integrity to to this community. And I hope that it isn't just, Friends of Highland Cemetery are, as I say, if we do nothing else, we're bearing witness. We're trying to keep these names and these memories and this wonderful place from vanishing into the wind.